Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Sonnet Ball Python. It's a pretty interesting combination of genes. It actually consists of the cinnamon, the super pastel, and the pinstripe. And the cinnamon can really vary from one example of the cinnamon to the other. So if you actually look at a bunch of different sonnets, they can look really different as far as the visual appearance, mainly because of the differences in the different lines of cinnamon. And when you work cinnamon into super pastel, you actually get the sterling. And some of the sterlings can be almost like a silvery metallic colored snake, which is pretty awesome. And then when you actually take the combination of the cinnamon and the super pastel, the sterling, and you add pinstripe to make the sonnet, essentially what the pinstripe does is a lot of times it'll completely wipe out all the pattern on your sterlings, and sometimes you'll end up with a completely patternless silver metallic looking snake, which is a pretty interesting combination. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you how to make a sonnet and some of the challenges working other genes into the sonnet ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with the genes that make up the sonnet ball python. And the first one I want to start with is the cinnamon. This is one version of the cinnamon. The cinnamon can be pretty variable. And keep in mind the cinnamon is a dark gene, so when you work cinnamon into other combinations, it'll really darken the background of a lot of your combinations. And the cinnamon, sometimes they can actually look kind of like a dark normal, and in this case, you'll actually see this one kind of has this copper tone to the color of the pattern on the ball python. And a lot of the cinnamons that have this really strong copper color will actually transfer that copper color over into a lot of your combinations. And I've actually seen some cinnamons that look pretty much like a dark normal ball python. They don't look much different than a really dark normal. And in that case, you'll actually get some interesting combinations that really won't bring out a lot of the copper color. And a lot of times with your cinnamon, you'll actually have kind of a jumbled up pattern compared to like the Roswell gray alien heads that you'd see on your normal ball pythons. You can see it's a little bit jumbled up, and in certain combinations it'll actually take this and kind of give you a really weird streaking effect with a lot of little holes all in the streak, which is a really awesome effect working cinnamon in with certain combinations. So here is the super pastel. This has two copies of the pastel gene, another component of the sonnet ball python. And the super pastel is kind of interesting. If you actually just have one copy of the pastel, a lot of times you'll get a yellow colored snake. And with two copies, it really enhances the brightness of the yellow. And the super pastel really scrambles up the pattern a lot more than just one copy of the pastel gene. And usually you can tell the difference between a super pastel and just one copy of the pastel by looking at the head. Usually the heads on the super pastel are really faded out, and a lot of times in the super pastels you'll get almost like a white background that kind of shines through in places. I've actually seen where some of them have a lot of black in the background and some of them have more white, almost all white as far as what you can expect from the background in some of your super pastels. So if you actually take the super pastel and mix in the cinnamon, this is what you get. You get a sterling, and take a look at this. This is definitely one of my favorite silver colored snakes. It's pretty amazing. I've actually seen some of these in person and they look almost metallic between the combination of the super pastel and the cinnamon. And keep in mind the sterlings can really vary from one example of a sterling to another. So this is kind of an extreme case where you see one that is almost like a metallic silver color. I pulled up another sterling. Take a look at this one. This is exactly the same genes as the last one. And look at how different it is from one example of the sterling to the other. And I'm convinced that the differences between these really come down to the differences mainly in the different cinnamons. Some of the cinnamons can have a lot more of this coppery color than some of the other ones. And I've actually seen in the pastels too. As a matter of fact, I've actually produced some here in my collection that kind of have a coppery color to the pastel. So if you actually combine kind of the coppered color cinnamon with a coppered colored super pastel genes, you'll actually get almost like a coppery color sterling, which is pretty amazing. It has the same exact genes, but it can really differ from one example to the other. So here is the pinstripe. The pinstripe's definitely one of my favorite jeans. This is the other jean that's in the Sonnet Ball Python. And the pinstripe's kind of interesting. I've actually seen some that are really super bright gold. And if you actually work pinstripe with the right combinations, you'll get a lot of metallic colored snakes. Sometimes you'll get like a gold metallic like this one, and sometimes you'll get a silver metallic, especially if you work pinstripe in with jeans like bamboo. One of my favorite combinations. I've produced quite a few bamboo pinstripes or bamboo lemon blast with the pinstripe and the pastel that look almost like a silvery metallic. It's pretty awesome. I was actually taking a look at this one. This one is actually 50% at sunset, and it was actually still for sale. And take a look at this. It's only $125. Let me tell you, if you wanted to get into the sunset project, that would be a great way to do it, because the sunset is a really expensive recessive project. I just kind of noticed that. I couldn't believe it was only $125 for a 50% het sunset, which is pretty awesome. So here's what happens if you take the sunset and the pinstripe and you work it into the sterling. Take a look at this. You get the Sonnet, which, take a look at this. This is an amazing snake. I actually saw one video over on YouTube. I was looking for videos over there, and no one really made a video about the Sonnet Ball Python. And it's kind of an interesting combination. Some of these look like almost like a metallic looking snake that is completely patternless with no pattern almost at all in the Ball Python. And if you actually take a look at this and kind of wrap your head around the jeans, you can definitely tell this one doesn't really have the copper colored cinnamon or potentially the copper colored pastels in the mix. I actually pulled up another sonnet over here. Take a look at this one. Look at how different the different sonnets can look from one example to the other. And it's pretty much the same if you're working cinnamon into almost any other combination. Sometimes you can get a lot of that coppery color, and sometimes you'll get snakes without any of that copper color. It's pretty amazing. So take a look at this. If you actually work this is actually the Killer Blast. The Killer Blast is the combination of the pinstripe and the super pastel, which is a component of the Sonnet. And these two jeans, when you actually work them together, you get a really strong influence as far as like the Lemon Blasts or the Super Blast with one or two copies of the pastel. And if you actually look over here at this Sonnet, take a look at this, you can actually see a little bit of the Super Blast kind of coming out. You can see kind of the shattered pattern of the Super Blast and a little bit of the yellow from the Super Blast coming through. And if you actually look at this sterling, you really can't see much of that Super Blast coming through, which I thought was pretty interesting. So if we work other jeans into the Sonnet, the Sonnet can be really visually dominant, meaning it completely masks a lot of the patterns in the other jeans, working it into the combination. So take a look at this. I actually found a Sonnet over here on Morph Market that had the addition of the leopard and the spider, two jeans that are really strong pattern enhancing jeans. And look at the crazy pattern on the leopard spider. That thing is really crazy. So here's what happens if you actually take the leopard spider and you work it into the Sonnet. Take a look at that. The Sonnet completely eliminates all the pattern of the leopard and the spider, although you actually can't pick out the leopard and the spider in this one. In this one, it looks like you get a little bit of the black nose right up here. I'm thinking that is probably from the leopard, because the leopard is also a dark jean as well as the cinnamon. So you have like this double dark in the combination here, which is pretty awesome. And if you actually look at the sides on this one too, usually with a lot of your spiders, you actually have a lot of this white coming up the side, so you can see the white's really high up the side. I think that's probably a result of the spider in the mix. And this thing is crazy. Look at all the jeans in this. So this actually has the cinnamon, two copies of the pastel, the leopard, the pinstripe, and the spider. This is actually a 6 jean combination, which is pretty crazy. And look at the price on this. I was actually surprised. This only sold for $325 for a 6 jean combination. And if you actually bred this to something else, you would get all these jeans separated individually in all the offspring, which would be pretty awesome. All right, so here's the last one I want to show you, and that is the banana. So every time you have a really visually dominant combination, you can actually change the color by using the banana, because the banana doesn't really, as a matter of fact, the banana is not really visually dominant as far as the pattern, but when it comes to the color of the banana, it'll definitely have a really strong influence. You pretty much work anything into the banana, and most of the times you'll actually get a banana colored snake with a lot of the yellow and orange color coming through. So take a look at this. I'll actually pull this up over here. This is the banana sonnet. Take a look at that. That is a really crazy combination. It's like a really smoothed out banana, which is pretty wild. And almost in the background, you can almost see some of the Killer Blast coming through. And keep in mind, the Killer Blast brings in a lot of yellow in a lot of cases. So you actually have a little of the yellow from the Super Pastel kind of brightening the banana, making a really awesome combination, really smooth and creamy combination of all those genes. So this is actually the banana, the cinnamon, the Super Pastel, and the pinstripe. So there's actually a few different ways you can actually name this. This is actually named the Banana Super Blast Cinnamon. You could also name it the Banana Killer Blast. Some people use Killer Blast instead of Super Blast. You could also call it, let's see, so the Cinnamon Super Pastel would be Sterling. So you could also name this the Banana Pinstripe Sterling. There's a lot of different ways you can actually name this combination, which is pretty awesome. All right, so what is time for the question of the day? And Andre Charles asks, is it possible to make a candy or a toffee snow? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, I actually went over to morphmarket.com and I was searching to see if anyone had ever made a candy snow or a toffee snow, and it doesn't look like anyone's actually made one. And keep in mind, the candy and the toffee are pretty much the same gene. Most people are convinced that the candy and the toffee are exactly the same gene. And kind of the interesting thing with the snows, the snow is the combination of the albino and the axanthic. It's kind of an interesting combination because the albino is actually a yellow and white snake that has a lot of pattern to it, and the axanthic is pretty much a black and white snake, like a black and white and silver, stripped of all the color, but it actually has quite a bit of pattern to the axanthic. And for some reason, when you have axanthic and albino in the same combination, you end up with a white patternless snake with red eyes. I guess you could call it like a red-eyed leucistic combination, which is kind of weird. They actually call that combination a snow. And there's quite a few ways to make a snow. You can use different versions of the axanthic, and you can use different versions of the albino. And keep in mind, a lot of your axanthics aren't compatible. So if you actually breed two different lines together, a lot of times you'll get double hets that look like normal ball pythons. You actually won't get a visual. And it's kind of the same way with the albinos too. So if you're actually working with snows, you have to make sure you use compatible versions of the albinos and the axanthics when you're breeding your snows together. And I would imagine that if you use toffee or candy, you could definitely make a similar looking snow that would be completely white with the red eyes. And keep in mind, the albinos are really similar to the candies and the toffees. In fact, they're actually allelic, so you can actually have one copy of albino, one copy of the toffee to make your toffinos, and it's the same way with the candies. I'd say that the toffees and the candies are so close to albinos, you could probably definitely, I can almost guarantee that if you use candy or toffee and make a snow with any of the versions of the axanthic, that you would definitely get an all-white snake with red eyes. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.